Hey, I'm your host, Anthony Tank Mansfield, and with me this week is
Dillon Foreman.
And this is What You Into.
What you into? What you into?
Right. Dillon, man, welcome to the basement, dude. It's been a minute since we've seen each other. How you doing?
I appreciate you having me, man. I'm doing good. I'm sore, like I was telling you. I had leg day yesterday, upper body today, so I'm feeling it everywhere.
Your
but
shit's just jacked right now?
absolutely jacked. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm in the sore club with you as well.
Yeah.
It's weird when you're sore where just moving hurts. Do you ever get, I hate getting toilet sore, where it's like your legs are so blown out that if you go to sit down and take a shit, like it hurts just getting on the toilet.
And sometimes you just fall onto it.
Yeah. Like that last 3 inches just kind of drop.
Yeah. And then you go to get up and it's just
Yeah. It's like you're just like, just powering up through the bottom
You
of
know
it.
what? I'm just gonna stay here for a while.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm gonna let my legs fall asleep, and
Yeah.
I'll just eventually I'll become one with the toilet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Kind of like it's like on The Last of Us, where like the fungal guy sometimes attached to the wall. This is me now. I just live on this toilet for the rest
Just
of
my
my life.
sanctuary now.
Yeah, it's where I sit at. Oh man. Well, look, dude. Let's. I'm stoked to have you in today. I can't wait to talk audio engineering. Before we get there, let's do some plugs real quick. So for you, these are all Instagram. If people want to find you, it's _Dirtwalker. And then your two different podcasts. Foretold Fiction and Millennials Suck Podcast. I came out and did Millennials Suck Podcast. We had a good time. That's where we initially met at.
Yep.
Which it's a hang podcast. It's people shooting the shit.
Yeah, we try to make it a focus of, it's actually really similar to what you do. It's just basically instead of what you into, it's what you doing.
Yeah, what's happening.
We talk to people about, we try to bring on guests that are specifically doing something with their lives, whether they're artists or business owners, just, are you doing something cool that you can come on and talk about and promote? We label it as a showcase podcast. So we want to showcase our guest, what do you have to show the world that you're up to, but we also kind of wanted to have it that like, these are the people that are doing cool shit out in the world, but on their night off when you're just having a beer with them or whatever.
Yeah. And having that conversation too, which I think is important to like get to know people, different guests as a person. You know?
Especially if you have fans out in the world, they want to see, what's it like to hang out with Post Malone versus going to see him at a show or something like that,
And there is something different too about having long form interview podcasts where you can sit down and talk to somebody and actually get to know them.
Yeah.
As opposed to, just like a standard interview. It's like, hey, we're here for like 5-10 minutes and you got to get something in, but you're not peeling too many layers back on the onion.
Yeah. You get away from the soundbitey kind of stuff and really dig into who somebody is in their brain.
100%. Well, dude, let's talk about your other podcast though. So like Foretold Fiction, like this is a cool concept. I've not seen something like this before.
So Foretold Fiction is really, really fun. So I've got a friend of mine, Jason Fix, who you should have on the show as well. Cause he's a voice actor. You can get into that with him. He's an amazing creative person. But I worked with him at this trucking job that we both used to have. And he was actually my boss, but he would always be doing these crazy voices, just yelling shit out on the dock and all that, just trying to make his day, fun.
Right.
And he's an only child. So he told me about, he would play with his action figures and give them voices and all that stuff. He had to be his own friend. So there's like multiple people inside of his head or whatever. But I asked him one day, like, have you ever thought about doing this? Cause like your different voices are so good. Like if you close your eyes, you swear it's different people talking to you. It's awesome. And it took a while, but I eventually got him into the studio and, I've been looking into doing, like voiceover and like narration work for audiobooks and video games and all that kind of shit recently. So trying to take my audio production game in that direction. And, at first we started out doing, I had him doing like I said, narration stuff, reading different like ads and whatnot, just to try to get his voice out there. And I was like, you know what I'd like to do is produce for you something like an online portfolio. I want people to be able to hear you doing these voices and these characters. How do we do that? And it was like, well, I'm already a podcast host. I already do interview people. Why don't I just interview you as your characters? So you can just be the character for a little while and I'll just talk to them. And ended up turning into this big thing now where, you know, these characters that we're creating are a part of a universe that we're creating, you know, so it still has the feel of a long form one-on-one kind of podcast, but there's this background narrative that's going on. So like as you listen to the episodes, there's a story being told, and it's a fictional podcast with the feel of a real life podcast. And that's something I've never seen before. But, you know, like I said, it was ultimately just to get his voice out there. But now it's this whole big project that we're just balls deep in. Like, this is fucking awesome.
It sounds great, and it does seem like a fucking cool thing. And you're right, because it is straddling that weird line of, I've definitely listened to a ton of interview podcasts or people just chilling in a room, whatever, you know, hanging out. But I've listened to fictional podcasts. I've listened to stuff where like people doing like old timey radio type stuff. Like one of our neighbors, they did a whole sci-fi series, and you know, and then there's one that was like the zombie show back. They used to listen to, was a horror show called We're Alive, and like the show had Foley artists and all these different voices and stuff, and you would hear things. But you're kind of like in this weird in between world where you're dealing with fictional characters, but they're being interviewed in a real way. It's interesting. I think it's a fucking cool concept.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I also like the idea of you saying universe building. I think that's really cool too. Yeah, I think it's interesting when you create your own world where people interact and things interact and they play off each other and personalities. I mean, that's storytelling.
Yeah, and it's really fun too. Like when we go to show people and they ask us like, is this like, how long does it take you guys to script this out? And we tell them like, it's all off the top. You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't have that real life podcast feel if we scripted it. It would just be like a TV show.
Right.
But so we just kind of develop a general idea of where we want the story to go. You know, what do we want to learn in this episode? Who are we talking to? What out of their backstory is important to this world building that we're doing? And, you know, we have a few key points that we want to hit throughout the episode. But other than that, it's just off the wall, like whatever comes to mind, we go with it. And I just kind of, you know, I'm just sort of the host guiding it as it goes. And he is the creative chaos that I'm just pulling through this adventure. And it's so cool.
That's awesome, man. Hell yeah. Well, dude, let's, before we get into that, let me talk about my thing real quick. I got, you can find me online at neotoknoone.com is the website, at neotoknoone on Instagram is my Instagram. And, if you are in Cincinnati, check out my beer collaboration that I did with High Grain Brewing, Rants and Rabbit Holes. It's still on draft at High Grain. I'm going to be going there this Friday night to hang out for a neighborhood bar crawl. So stopping and getting some of that. But they have 6-packs there, and also some of the bottle shops in the Cincinnati area have them. So pick them up if you want to support the show and support a really cool brewery.
Also, real quick too, I was telling you before the show, I work at a RJ Tap House at Element Eatery. And we have a few high grains on tap there. High grain Monarch, the high grain Lucin.
Oh yeah, that's
Pilsner.
Yeah,
and the we just got the Alpsea Dunkel on tap, and like, dude, high grain flies out of that place, man. Like they're such good beers.
They make great stuff. Yeah, they're. I think I think having both Utter and Brad there with their abilities of what they can do as brewers and what their vision of what they want things to be, they just make really good stuff, and they're very versatile. I think that's huge because there's some breweries that just do like, oh, hey, we're the brewery that like we're the hoppy brewery, or like we're the dessert stout brewery, like that's our lane. And it's like cool, but it's like with them, they can just open up a huge arsenal of beers they can pull from, and they're really good, and they taste like the style they should taste like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very impressed with what they make over there.
And they're super popular, man. People love it.
Yeah, it's cool shit. Well, hey, they're getting a second location for a reason. So, and yeah, it speaks to it. The people want to support them. Well, look, man, before we start talking tonight about the audio engineering side of things, let's kind of start talking out with, you started out as a performer, like a musician before moving behind the boards. So let's kind of talk about that, man. Like, how did you first get into music?
My parents bought me a drum set when I was like 3.
Okay.
And I mean, even going before that, I was raised by Metal Mania on MTV, basically. You know, my parents had me just in one of those like baby swings with a bottle in my mouth in front of, you know, just music videos. And I was just encapsulated by that. I wasn't even old enough to remember that, but my parents were like, "You fucking love music." So, you know, they bought me a little toy drum set, and I destroyed that thing within like a week.
Really?
You know, so they were like, he's going to need like the real thing. So I got my first like real drum set somewhere around like 9 or 10.
Okay.
I got my, you know, a DW 5-piece drum kit, and I put in headphones and I just kind of self-taught, listening to my favorite music. Like, okay, that drum that I just heard sounds like this one, and just slowly kind of put together, you know, what I know I'm supposed to be hitting, basically. And I just did that for years. You know, instead of hanging out with friends after school, I went home and played my drum kit. You know, the friends I did have at school, we stayed friends because they had gotten guitars for Christmas or something like that. So I started hanging out with a specific group of people. Like, we all sat at the lunch table. We were the music kids, you know, we were the bad boys or whatever. And then we were, you know, jumped into like choir and stuff after that. Got into like even show choir and stuff, you know, just learning to perform music with a group and all that. And, we had, you know, various different bands we'd practice after school and all that shit, you know, as you do, just garage jams. And it was funny because the other parents of the kids who would get dropped off, they would tell my parents like, "Oh, I'm glad it's you and not me." And my parents were like, "Fuck you guys." Like, you should be so excited. Your kids are getting together to play music together. That's so fucking cool. Like, my parents loved being the house that everybody
Like being
jammed
the
at.
music house?
Yeah,
Nice.
dude, it was super cool. And they've always been amazingly supportive.
It sounds like it. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, talking about just like encouraging you from a super young age and
Yeah.
like seeing that you wanted to get into. I mean, were you somebody that did you naturally have rhythm before you started playing drums, or was that something you kind of had to teach yourself? Like,
I mean, I definitely had a sense of rhythm. You know, I don't remember what my playing sounded like as a kid, but I actually have like a core memory one day of sitting and listening to some music that my mom was playing. And I was sitting there counting the beats and realized that all music could be counted in 4s. And nobody taught me that. I was just like, that's really interesting that I can count to 4 and it just keeps repeating in almost every song I listen to. So my brain just kind of automatically had this sense of what's happening rhythmically within the music, but I didn't understand it, you know? And I mean, I picked up a pair of drumsticks and just started hitting, and like, I realized if you don't play in time, it doesn't sound good. So,
Right.
you know, you kind of just, or at least in my case, I just acclimated to playing at the speed of the music and making sure it fit. So I guess it kind of came naturally. I didn't really have to work towards having rhythm specifically. Just I had to work towards not playing too fast because I was an angsty kid. Like, let's fucking go fast, boys.
guys, we're not going faster right now. Let's warp speed it. And they're like,
Exactly.
They're like, dude, chill. Like,
Dude, I'm so excited to play drums right now, man.
so, like, did your kit grow with you over time? Like, how did you start to? Did you start to add things to the 5-piece?
Not really, man. I always kept it kind of simple, and it was more so about the attitude of the playing for me that mattered. You know, I saw these guys that had giant wraparound kits. Like, I mean, you watch Neil Peart. I mean, he's got a kit that literally goes 360 degrees around him. And I mean, I always thought that was really cool to have all that at your disposal. But, you know, for me, it was watching these guys that could rock the fuck out of a drum set that looked like it was barely anything. You know, there's only 4 drums on the thing, and they sound like they're hitting 1,000 drums. Like, there's something to be said about just a badass drummer does not need an entire small town's worth of drums around him to do something amazing on a kit. And the intensity, the like I said, the attitude, and just the attitude of the music itself. The way the drummer melds with a guitarist and a bassist, and whether they get together to sound mean or to sound groovy or whatever, they can create an ambience in their performance. That was the more important thing to me. And also sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. Like I don't need more drums to be a badass drummer and live the rock star life. I just need to be fucking awesome at what I do. So it's just more focused on the skill, and I got into songwriting pretty early, where I didn't want to just play drums. I wanted to write lyrics, and I wanted to write guitar parts and breakdowns and all that cool shit.
So, okay, I think that drums gives you, and this is from my novice opinion as somebody who's listened to a lot of music but has never played music, but I think that being a drummer is a solid way to start out, because you're setting the sound stage for everything else. Like, you're setting the beat.
Yeah.
And therefore, having that in your back pocket, I feel like that would allow you to then transfer to other instruments easier, because you know the thing that everything starts out around.
Yeah. And I always kind of made the analogy that, if you were looking at drum or like at music as almost an anatomical thing, the drums are the skeleton of the person. The bass is the muscle. Those two things work together to create the structure and the movement. The guitar and the vocals are like the clothes and tattoos. That's the image, the attitude, all that kind of stuff. So, every part of the band fills their own super important role that can't be replaced by another portion of the band. But yeah, I always said you could go to a concert of nothing but drummers and put on a show. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to be a stage full of guitarists without any drums and put on a full show. That rhythm is where music started for humans in general. We were playing drums and dancing and singing around fires.
Right.
You got to have that percussive element.
Yeah, and it works for everything. I mean, and you can play it loudly both in hip hop and in metal, but those genres are different.
Yeah.
But that's the core thing that both need to work. And I've always thought with, like, especially heavy music, I'm always the bands that I tend to like that play in, whether it be metal or hardcore or doom or thrash or whatever, but it's like, do they have a rhythm section? Like, what is their drums like? What is their bass like? Yeah. And a lot of times in heavy music, bass gets forgotten. Yeah. And it's just like, no, it's a very important thing that you have to have, because without it, you're really down. You're really down something that really helps to meld this thing together, because you can't have the guitars going up and all over the place and singers go, super screaming very high or gutturally growling if there's not like something rhythmically that you can kind of sway and bounce and nod your head to.
If anybody around me, especially if we're in the studio, minimizes bass, the first thing I do is I show them a track and I turn the bass off and let them hear. Like, you don't realize how much power your songs wouldn't have if that bassist wasn't there. You may not hear them. They may not be catching your attention all the time.
Right.
But if they weren't there, you wouldn't like this music.
Yeah, it's like breathing. You might not notice that you're doing it, but when you're not doing it, you're going to notice.
Yeah, it's really there.
Yeah, it becomes pretty fucking apparent pretty fucking quick.
Very
quickly. We need this.
Yeah.
So you got up from behind the kit, you started playing other instruments, you started songwriting. What was it like getting into that creative process as a performer? Were you writing lyrics, or were you just like structurally bringing the song together?
So in the beginning, all I was really doing was drums and poetry, essentially. It was pretty much just lyrics, and I was just writing stuff that rhymes, trying to sharpen my linguistic skills, my vocabulary, and just getting good at creating like vocal cadences where, I think Tim Henson from Polyphia put it the best. Like, somebody asked him, how do you write your guitar parts? And he's like, to me, a guitar solo is basically filling the role of a vocal. And I think that works both ways, where to me, a great vocal sounds like a really, really good guitar riff. It should be catchy. You know, like you might not know the words to the song, but you know how to hum it.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to focus on like the sound of the vocal. And, you know, I was basically just kind of figuring out how to make words fit when you need them to a particular sound.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I trained my brain and, you know, just how do I make the number of syllables in this sentence work so that it rhythmically comes out right and I can make this vocal riff work.
As you're explaining this to me, I now get why the Red Hot Chili Peppers work.
Yeah.
Because I hate Anthony Kiedis' lyrics, but I'm realizing in my head the reason why it works is because him be like stump a dump a dump a lump dump, and
it doesn't matter what he's
it doesn't
singing.
matter what he says. He can just
Yeah.
be saying nonsense words, but he's making these things that are just that's Anthony Kiedis.
Another a great example I was told. Think about Thriller. 'Cause it's Thriller night. Da, 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 da. You don't know what those words are right there, but you know what those vocals sound like.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter what you say, just the way you say it is. I mean, you can go back later and put in some profound lyrics and stuff like that if you want to be creative, but ultimately, the way it sounds and melds with the rhythm and the key and all that stuff is really what makes it powerful.
Yeah, and I think it also explains too the like when you hear cover songs and when that you can either make or break that.
Yeah.
And that's also interesting because with covers, like sometimes people will try to do the thing. You know, I've seen like Heart cover Led Zeppelin a bunch, and it's like tonally it sounds pretty close. Like it's not like super far apart. It's like, oh, this okay, I see it. But then I also like stuff where people will cover things and it sounds nothing like it. So for example, like I have a Deftones album that's all covers, and it's like Chino Marino singing Morrissey, you know, and it's
Right.
you know, and it's like singing Smith songs, and it's just like these two guys sound nothing alike, but this works, and
Yeah.
I like the way it works. But I like the way it works because like they both had this signature sound that makes the song, no matter what the song is, it works.
And it's sort of like with like Chris Cornell later in his career,
Oh,
he
yeah,
did
yeah.
all those acoustic covers.
Yeah.
And it was like the covers became more popular than the original song because he just did them so well. Wildly different,
Mm-hmm.
completely different thing. Or, you know, there are still people on this earth that argue that Hurt was written by Johnny Cash.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because he stole that. That's his song now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just such an iconic cover that it's almost an original in and of itself.
Yeah, no, there is definitely that too, where people start to take songs and it's like, oh, you know, you think about that before you think about the original. That happened with me with I was introduced to Landslide when the Smashing Pumpkins covered it, and then I found out it was the Fleetwood Mac song, and I'm like, oh shit, I had no clue, you know?
Yeah.
And then, but
Such a good song, too.
yeah, it's a great song. And you know, but yeah, it's just like oh, cool, and it's interesting the way that all works out.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. Okay, well let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get you on the other side of the studio.
Okay.
So when did you make the jump into sound engineering? Like how did you? So it kind of so let me. Sorry to start to answer your question for you before you jump in, but just from what I've been able to get so far, it's like coming out as a drummer and then starting to build into other instruments and then wanting to get into songwriting and like to me, it makes sense that you're now wanting to explore this other side because you've explored the front side of it. Now you're kind of on the back side of it. Is that where it is?
So it was more that, you know, once I made the decision that I really wanted to pursue music, it started off in college. You know, I went to college to be a pilot, which is awesome. I would still go fly planes for a living because it's fucking awesome. But, you know, one day I was at flight school and I'm out in the parking lot. I've got my flight bag next to me, you know, my headset. Like 15 feet away from me is a plane that I'm about to go learn to fly for a living. I should be more excited to do this than I've ever been to do anything in my life. Mm-hmm. And all I want to do is tell my instructor I'm sick, call off, because I'm pissed off right now that my flight lesson has interrupted my drum practice. And I'm like, I think that's indicative, you know, like there's something about me that's screaming to me like, hey, you're on the wrong path right now. This is cool, but it's not your thing. Mm-hmm. So I dropped out of school immediately. Like I went to the admissions office. I told them, pull out the rest of my loan money. I'm done.
Yeah.
So to my parents, just even to this day, they can't stand the fact that I dropped out of school. But again, they've always been super supportive. They're like, if you're going to follow, it's your life, live your dreams.
Now, as you're sitting here right now, I'm thinking, I'm like, shit, man, you could have been flying my connection flight from Minneapolis to Cincinnati. I was coming back from Vegas.
Yeah, I could be a full-time pilot right now. I would have, plenty of money. There's a pilot shortage right now too.
Oh, yeah.
I could have any job I want as a pilot had I stuck with that. And, that would have been a secure life path. That would have given me a lifetime of guaranteed comfort. But that's not what I wanted out of this existence.
I would not want to be a pilot.
I'd love to be a pilot. It's just that, again, like if I didn't do this,
I think it depends on what kind of pilot you get to be though. Cause like if I have to fly for like Delta, now I'm kind of like a bus driver where I'm like, where I'm like, oh man, I got to go from here to here and back and forth. But like if I had a thing where like flying crate for like DHL, like, hey, God bless them, somebody's got to do it. But I don't know if I'd want that thing where it's like, because I feel like that could get really like Groundhog's Day-ish. Where it's like, you're like, look, man, I've flown like 200 days this year. Like at this point, there's really nothing special to be in. Like, hey, we're going up in Detroit and we're coming down in Tulsa. Like, all right,
yeah,
cool.
it's just another day, man.
It's going to be like 3 hours and we're up in the sky. Maybe we'll get lucky. We'll hit some turbulence and I'll actually, have to fly the plane and before turning it back on autopilot. But no, there could definitely be some cool jobs. Like the dudes that fly helicopters around the city. I feel like that'd be a pretty sick job.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, like if you get hooked up or like you got like a rich guy who's like, hey, drop me off on top of a tower somewhere.
Yep.
Or the people that do like med flight, that would be cool. That'd be fulfilling.
Yeah.
You get something new every day, although you'd see some horrific shit.
Awful things. I mean, and plus you'd get, be at home and all of a sudden 3 a.m, your phone's going off like, hey, you need to go fly a helicopter.
Yeah. Somebody ran over a kid with a tractor. It's like, oh, fuck. Okay.
All right, we're on the way.
Yeah, we're on the way. Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy too, like with the med flight stuff, like all the places they have to go to. Mm-hmm. My buddy was at a scooter rally, like Vespa scooters.
Yeah.
And they took over a band camp in somewhere in Pennsylvania. And so the band camp had like a full on football field there because the bands would practice on the football field. So then they also had an outer, like a track. And all the Vespa dudes started using it as a racetrack. And so they're all tearing ass around.
That's fun.
Yeah. Right? Like, yeah, taking over like a band camp and you get to race Vespas all day and you're just drinking PBRs. It's all right, cool.
Hell yeah.
But then one of the dudes fucking ate it and like got like a bad leg break. And they couldn't because they were so deep and back in there. Like for some reason they couldn't bring in a paramedic. And so they ended up like flying in, or maybe he did something worse than break leg, but they ended up flying in the fucking med flight and they landed it in the middle of the football field and they had to extract him from there.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's just like, holy shit. I couldn't imagine like, again, you're flying the helicopter. It's like, come on, man, we got to like pick up this dude that's all fucked up on a Vespa in the middle of nowhere at a band camp.
Right. It just makes it convenient not to have to follow the roads too. Like just, dude, we just need to get there and out as quick as possible.
Yeah. Just drop the bird in, get it out.
Yeah.
All right, so you got out of college, and then you were like, all right. Time
I started doing research into like how to do this for a living. Like, how do you create a career in music? And I thought the best way to answer that question is just to start listening to the people who do it for a living. Like, what do they have to say about it? And it was just so disheartening at the time because, I'm listening to like internationally famous bands that are on tour all year long. They're living my dream. And people are asking them like, do you have any, advice for up and coming artists and stuff like that? And they're just like, yeah, don't do this. There's no money in this. If you want, security, if you're trying to be financially set or whatever, this is not the career for you. But if you've got a passion for this, then go do it. And I was like, I mean, I've definitely got the passion for it, but something about that doesn't work for me. Like you can't sell millions of copies of anything and there not be any money. Somebody's making money here.
Yes. Between merch and everything else and tour dates and cause I know what I pay to go to concerts and somebody's making a buck here.
Somebody's getting cash.
And I think another thing with that too, is I think in any creative endeavor, there's a point where the pendulum swings. For the most part, it's somebody else making the bulk of the money until you get to a certain point where you're so big that now you make the money because the pendulum has swung to where you're more important than them. But there's so few people that get there. I mean, it is like, you're saying earlier, like somebody like Post Malone or like somebody, somebody like the Rolling Stones or, somebody like Motley Crue, like just these bands that are just so big and they play like gigantic places and people buy the albums and they get the residuals and they have the merch. Yeah. But there's such a small number of those people. And it's that way in like every creative thing. Like with artists, there's only so many people that are making like big money. Or there's, if you look at something like stand-up comedy, you have people like Tom Segura that will sell out a theater with like 3,000 people. But then there's also guys that are just, they're hoping that 100 people come to like go bananas and just to get them through that weekend.
But even those big people were some of the people that I heard talking about this.
Really?
Where they don't have this money. They're worth a lot of money, but that doesn't mean they have a lot of money. And that was a weird thing that I had to learn too, was like, your worth isn't necessarily your wealth. And that's where I kind of like, look at the whole like Kanye West thing. People are talking about how he's tens of millions of dollars in debt. How is this massive individual in that much debt? And that's where I started to learn, like, okay, record labels, record contracts and stuff like that. There are a lot of fine lines here that people don't really recognize until you get into this kind of business that you got to learn to cope with. When somebody releases an album, you think, okay, Taylor Swift goes into a studio, she's got songs written, they record them, they sell them, makes a bunch of money, everybody gets paid. Not that easy. Before that album comes out, the songs are written, the studio you go to is paid for before you get there. So you've already gone into debt. The studio that it's being recorded in, that space is being rented. The engineer behind the computer is being paid for that time. The producer is being paid for that time. Any amount of, food, booze, drugs, anything you want, all of that is being added to this list of like a bill, essentially, so that by the time that music comes out, you've already paid the studio, the producer, the engineer, the people who are distributing it. You've paid for it to be printed if it's going into, a physical release. You've already put the time and money into, putting it out there, whether it's going to Spotify or whatever. There's all these different channels that you've got to put money into before the music ever even hits the market.
I'm loving the idea of like drugs being a line item.
Yeah.
Where it's like where your account's looking at, it's like, did you spent $40,000 on coke last year? It's like, shit, man, I didn't know.
But that album was badass.
It was great. It really was good. It was a solid album, man.
Wouldn't have had that without the cocaine.
Yeah, no, that's dude. Track 7, I don't even remember writing it, but
dude, every Black Sabbath album ever was that.
Oh yeah, when they wrote Snowblind,
and piles of cocaine in a studio.
Yeah, it's like they wrote some classics.
And that was like I read the Ozzy Osbourne autobiography where he talks about that. I mean, the record label literally told them anything you need. They had one guy they could call, whether they wanted a house, a car, drugs, anything they needed. They called this dude and he would get it to them.
He's a genie.
Yeah, but that money came from somewhere, and what the record label is taking that out of your future sales. So that's where a lot of bands fuck up, is they get signed and they get starstruck. They're like, oh my God, because the label's going to feed them all this stuff about how, we're going to turn you into the next big thing. We really believe in you.
Yeah.
Let's make this a career. You're going to be famous, whatever.
Sure.
But then the album gets released and it doesn't do as well as they thought it would. Well, now that band not only owes that record label money, but now on top of that, the record label puts their band on the shelf. They own the name. So now you can't even perform as the band anymore because the record label owns your music. They own your name. They own your artwork, and you owe them money if you want that back. So, bands essentially at this point, I think I read that like 97% of all musical acts that get signed get dropped or shelved because they just, the record labels are taking a chance on something.
Right.
And if they can't make a return on it, it's not a good business investment. So, as a young musician, you look at all of this and you try to make sense of it and be like, okay, so I need to try to be marketable. I need to try to be friends with people in high places and all this. And I was like, you know what? Fuck all that. What if I don't have to pay anybody to do it?
What if I'm the guy who's getting paid up front?
Yeah. What if I can, that means if I can make my own music, if I can write the music, if I can record it, if I can mix it and master it, if I can basically turn myself into an assembly line of music where on one side you just put empty shit and on the other side comes out finished music that's ready to release, if I don't owe anybody any money after that process, everything's profit. If I only ever make $1 off my music, I'm $1 in profit, no debt. So that was the ultimate driving force behind that. Like, I need to be able to record my own shit.
Nice. Let's back to the future of this. So let's start out present day with this.
Okay.
What kind of equipment are you sitting on right now? Like do you like studio wise? Like how much shit do you have?
Enough. I mean, between, if you did like instruments, I have, when it was brand new, it was roughly like a $1,200 drum set. Like I've got, a really badass guitar amp that's another, $800 to $1,000. I've got a couple guitars and basses, that's another couple grand in equipment. So that's just the instruments themselves. Then you get into microphones, and that is a whole deal in and of itself. I've got a stack of various different kinds of mics that, if you add them all together, again, that's another several $1,000s of equipment. And then, a new computer that can handle all this work, that's, somewhere between $500 and $1,000. I don't remember exactly. But then, studio monitors, like a sub, so you can hear everything.
Yep.
And then sound treatment and stuff too. Like you saw in the studio, the walls are covered in treatment. There's a vocal booth that's all foamed in and all that stuff. It's taken a lot. I started recording music when I was 19. And at the time, I had a really good job because I had dropped out of school and I was like, I need to just make money right now while I figure shit out. So I got myself a decent job and saved up money, and I spent $2,000 at Guitar Center. And I had a laptop at the time. So I got some recording software and interface to plug it into. I bought an electric drum kit just to be able to make noise on it, and a single microphone. All of that, it was like, let's see what we can make happen here. Mm-hmm. And
when you bought the first program, like what did you get?
Studio One.
Okay.
I still use Studio One today.
Really?
That's the one I learned on. And, I just kind of stuck with it. I figured it didn't really matter which one I used as long as I could record. And then I found out through my research, it really doesn't matter which one you use. People make the argument like, oh, Pro Tools is the industry standard, which it is. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as long as you're putting out high quality audio, it doesn't matter how you made it. What matters is how it sounds.
Right. Yeah. And that's what you're saying is you can make a direct comparison to like Adobe in the design space where, the industry standard, like if you're working for a company, then you're going to have Photoshop and Illustrator, InDesign, things like that. But when it comes down to it, it's like, yeah, man, but I can get Procreate and I can do a lot of the same shit. Or there's like other freeware programs you can get into and all these offshoots. And it's just like, all right, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And we can make the product. It's just gonna be a little different. But yeah, having that industry standard is also a thing where it's just, if you need an answer to something, probably somebody else has already asked the question. So it's easier to look up shit on it just because it is so vast.
And it just makes it easier to get jobs. If you want to work for, like if I wanted to go be an engineer for a studio and they use Pro Tools, I can't ask them to just get a whole new program just for me. I'm going to have to learn Pro Tools, so, it's just like if you were an illustrator or, a videographer or something, if you don't know how to use Adobe Premiere Pro and this, video production company expects professional work, they expect you to know Premiere Pro, even if you use something else regularly.
Right.
That's something that it's just an industry standard. It makes it easier to get into the industry with people who already know what they're doing.
Right.
But ultimately, the people in the industry also know skill when they see it. You know, you might learn the basics on something else, but ultimately, like, Pro Tools does the exact same thing that Studio One does. It just is a different company. It's a different software. But even if you don't know how to use Pro Tools, I know you know how to use a compressor, an equalizer, a limiter, saturation, all that stuff that makes music sound good, that makes audio high quality. I know you know how to do that. So I don't mind teaching you to use this software because I already know you have the ear for what's coming out of the speakers.
So with like getting Studio One, how were you teaching yourself? I mean, were you just like, was it trial and error? Were you looking at videos on YouTube? Were you getting books out? Like how were you figuring out how to work with this thing?
It's a combination of all of them.
Yeah.
You know, mostly trial and error at first. I mean, when you look at it, you can see a button that it's the record circle. You can see play, you can see stop, you know, like you start to find your way. I mean, it all looks like it's in a foreign language at first,
right.
But you know, eventually you get to the point that, all right, I know this button does this thing. And, you know, you do it so many times that it just becomes second nature and you just keep adding to that as you go. I'm still learning things that Studio One can do to this day.
Right.
That I'm like, oh, that would have made my life so much easier for the past 10 years, you know?
I had a thing happen recently where I had to do color separations, and I looked up, and I've been doing them for years, where I've been doing what's called a knockout, where you can set it up so that you gotta make a copy of the layer in Photoshop, and then you gotta like do this thing where basically you end up dropping the entire shape of that color down through the other layer. You have to combine them, but it will eventually make separate layers. And for some reason, I'm having trouble doing this with the thing I was working on. And I also had like 25 layers and colors all over the place. And I was just like, fuck. And I looked at this video and somebody was like, oh, just do color range and then select the color. And then you can just do copy. And then you can do new layer and then paste. I'm like, fuck, okay.
Son of a bitch.
Like
I've made things so easy.
I've been doing this the old fashioned way of like doing different layers and putting stuff together and like, you know, trying to make sure I got my colors and stuff. No, I just could have been copying and pasting the entire time.
Yep.
Thanks, YouTube. You know, but now that I know, I'm not going to forget, because it's like, oh shit, that makes it so easy to do.
So much faster.
But yeah, man, I'm with you. I'm a big learn on YouTube guy. There's so much shit that anytime I have a problem, I look it up on YouTube. Recently, we had a whistling toilet, and I was like, what the fuck is it the pipes? And then I figured out after a minute that it was like, oh, it's actually coming from inside the bowl. And I just like YouTubed whistling toilet, and sure enough, it's like, oh, here's your thing. Here's how to fix it. Go to the hardware store, literally buy a $2 part, come back, and we are no longer experiencing a train whistle coming out of our bathroom.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I'm a proud postgraduate of YouTube University for sure.
And it amazes me the shit that people put on there, where it's just like, I don't know who you are. I don't know why. Like, seriously, some guy was like, hey, does your toilet whistle? Let me make a video. It's like, why the fuck would you make this? Okay, cool, man. Thank you.
Because people need to know.
Yeah.
You know, if you're it's just like with I heard you, one of your earlier episodes, you were talking about, you know, being a good old fashioned capitalist, filling in a niche when it's needed. If somebody types it in on YouTube and then there's nothing there and you're the only one that's got the content they're looking for, I mean, you can get lifetime viewership just from that.
Yeah. Well, and YouTube's turned into such a thing now where it's so like people have like specialized channels, and I'm really impressed by a lot of the video work people are doing, where it's just, it wasn't possible 20 years ago, you know, where like you would have to have a massive studio, and so much stuff has happened now for artists, whether it be audio, digital, in terms of like either with cameras for video or for drawing with digital. Like we have so much more access to tools now to make things that before was so fucking expensive and hard to do.
I've heard a lot of like old school musicians talk about how jealous they are of kids now, because they, you know, just wish they could have had the entire world's history of music in one place. They're like, no, I used to have to go to the library and rent CDs and cassettes and all that shit. Like we have it so good nowadays.
Oh, it was a different world back then, man.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, it was the kind of thing where I remember having to mail order CDs that I would want, or finding out about bands by like looking in the linear notes and seeing bands that they thanked, or they were wearing other bands' t-shirts. I'm like, oh, I'll check out who that is.
Yeah.
You know, and I was talking to one of my friends on an earlier episode, and he was talking about like not knowing what members of bands look like for years because he was like listening to underground bands in the 80s, and he was like, there wasn't like magazines and photos of these guys, unless you saw them live, you kind of just didn't know what the fuck they looked like. And if they didn't include their picture somewhere in the album, who knows?
No idea.
Yeah.
The only caveat to that is that because it's so easy to, have access to these resources, the competition is just so much more stiff. I mean, it's just like with video games. You can be a badass at Call of Duty and still get ass fucked by some 12-year-old in Japan.
Right.
It's the same thing with literally anything. Like, especially with stuff like music, anything creative, video, drawing or whatever. If there's a kid who hasn't even graduated middle school, who has all day, every day with no responsibilities, no day job or anything, who can just spend hours a day learning to do the exact same thing you are, they've got such a head start. They've got access to so much material to learn from. They can, speed through your 10 years of experience in the next 2 or 3.
Yep.
And just become badasses at it before they even become adults.
Well, and it's also the younger you learn something, the more moldable you are in that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's true for a lot of stuff. You'll see I a lot of times, like, you'll see it like in wrestling where like kids that learn how to grapple just when they're like 4 or 5,
right.
By the time they're in high school, they're the ones that are, going to state and stuff like that, or then going on to college, just because you get that muscle memory from so young.
And that's how you see UFC champions at
Yeah.
22 years old.
Exactly.
Like the most scary people on the planet, and they haven't even finished growing yet.
Yeah, and because they just don't have to think about it.
Right.
And that's, I mean, you think about that too with like things like snowboarding or just other sports, figure skating. My cousin Lisa, her son Gabe, like they got him out on skates to play hockey when he was like 2 or 3. And now he's on like a travel team and all this shit. And, his dad like played in college. So there's a pretty good shot that he'll end up there. And it's just like, yeah, that kid's a monster because ever since he could walk, he's been on skates, and he doesn't have to fucking think, whereas if I were to put on skates as a 42-year-old man, I'd be on my ass and have a knee blown out just because like I got no clue what I'm doing. And you throw him out there, he's going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to be, one of those people that, regardless of how old you are, it's never too late to start pursuing something, but I mean, you do have to understand that when you go into it. It's like, if you're just starting in a new skill in your 50s, you've still got plenty of time to become a master at that skill, but you're not going to pick it up as fast or become as fluid with it as somebody who's, 20.
Right.
It just, something about having all of that at your fingertips at a young age just makes it where you can become such a badass so fast.
Yeah. And I wonder, man, I'm sure there's got to be like some kind of research on this of like why it is that when you're younger, when you're in those formative years, it makes it so you pick it up. I mean, it can't just be a time thing. Like,
I mean, I would think it's got something to do with evolution. I mean, like anybody who with a child knows that a 3-year-old's brain is a sponge. They're picking up everything you say, everything you do. They mimic. That doesn't stop just because you've become an adult. You know what I mean? You're still, up until you're basically 30, 35 years old, your body is still learning things. Your brain is still wiring itself. So, I mean, well into our adult years, we're still being formed.
Yeah.
And so if you're continuously feeding your brain and body with something that you do consistently, I mean, our brains are adaptable. That whatever neurons fire in your brain the most often, that's where the strongest connections are. So if you're consistently doing something every day at any age, you're making that part of your brain stronger. And the younger you are, the faster those connections are built is the main thing.
Yeah.
You don't build new synapses as fast at 50 as you do at 20.
Right.
So 20-year-olds can just learn to be good at something faster, but that skill never goes away. It just takes longer as you get older.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, humans are pretty malleable to begin with, but like, especially when you're younger, you're way more of a loose thing of clay that can kind of be molded and do stuff. I do think it is interesting though, because you can learn things as you're younger, but it is also interesting to see what people drift towards as you're younger. You know, you think back to things like something like junior high or high school, where you people start like developing personalities, and it's like, you know, this person goes on to be the football guy, whereas this person goes on to be the kid in choir, whereas this person goes on to play the trombone in the marching band. Like, you know, they're just, and it's just interesting. Like, well, they could all be doing the other things that they're all doing, but for some reason they went in this direction.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting part of it too, is like what people do focus on.
And I think it's too, like, it says a lot that, you know, you hear older people say all the time, like, oh, if only I was 20 again. Like, if I was 25 again, I'd rule the world. And they're probably right.
Right.
Because, like, what you lose in that malleability as time goes on, you gain in wisdom and experience.
Right.
So, I mean, if we could only maintain, like, I'm so excited for medical technology to achieve the ability to slow down, if not stop aging. Because, like, I mean, if we could live to see, you know, 60 years old and still have the body of a 30-year-old, the things we'd be capable of would be fucking insane. God, it would be wonderful to have that life.
You know, and just having that energy, because I know the difference between me now as a middle-aged guy versus like meeting somebody in their 20s, and I'm just like, man, how do you stay up late and wake up at 9 with a hangover and just champ it? Like,
Right.
You know, just holy shit, I can't imagine, man. I wish I had that kind of energy. All right, so getting back in the studio. So, all right, how does recording work for different instruments? Like, is recording bass and guitar the same kind of thing, or because I got to figure recording drums and recording vocals also has to be very different. Like how, like where do these things are all the same, and then where are these things vastly different?
So the thing that ties all recording together is microphone. So a microphone is basically an electronic ear. So, I mean, there's, you know, a capsule inside of every microphone that vibrates, and that vibration gets turned into electrical signal that goes into whatever equipment you're recording into. Every microphone does that. So whatever you point that microphone at, it's going to pick up the sound of. What changes is what's in front of the microphone. What happens between the instrument and the microphone changes the recording process. So if I'm recording guitar, the guitar's, you know, if it's an acoustic, I'm just pointing the microphone at the acoustic and it's shooting sound into the microphone. If it's an electric guitar that's coming out of an amp, I'm just pointing, you know, a microphone directly into the amp speaker and picking up the sound. With a drum set, you got to think about drums as a pile of instruments. You know, a kick drum is an instrument in and of itself. A snare drum is an instrument in and of itself. So when I need to record a drum kit, I have to record, you know, like I've got, right now I'm playing a 4-piece drum kit. So I've got a kick drum, a snare drum, and 2 toms. That's 4 separate instruments. On the snare drum, I've got 2 microphones, top and bottom. Some people do the same thing on the kick drum. You know, you record on both sides of the drum. That could be 8 mics just in those 4 pieces.
Jesus.
Right. And then you've got the cymbals, where you've got 2 microphones that hang over top of the drum set pointing down at it to pick up the sound of the entire kit. So if you think about like the mics that are close to the drum are picking up each individual drum, the overhead mics are filling in the space between the drums so that it feels like a kit when you listen to it in the speakers. And then you add room mics. So, you know, if I'm recording the drums on this side of the room, I might have mics over on that side of the room to pick up not only the sound of the drum kit, but the sound of the room that the kit is in. There's a lot of layers that can go into that. For the most part, you know, anything besides drums, you can get away with recording with 1, maybe 2 microphones. If you want to get really experimental and fun, you can put 3 or 4 mics on one thing. That's really what makes recording percussion instruments different, is that each individual thing you hit is an instrument by itself.
Right.
So you've got to figure out how to put all of those together. And then you start getting into real technical stuff like phasing and all that stuff, where, you know, sometimes the mic that's supposed to be picking up the tom is also picking up the sound of the snare that's bleeding into it. And like, that's where you start getting into being an audio professional. Like, how do you deal with those problems? Because the more mics you have, the more problems you have.
That makes sense.
It gets
as
more
well.
complicated.
Yeah, well, and especially because like what you said there with layering, it's I mean, just from editing the podcast, I know that each mic is putting out its own track, and the way I have to layer stuff together, and if I make a cut, I have to cut across all the tracks for it to even out. And now I'm just thinking about the idea of having to do this with like 8 mics, 10 mics, and then now you have to also factor in, okay, which mic am I bumping up, which mic am I bumping down, and
When I noticed too, on the way here, I was listening to your latest episode with Lyra.
Oh yeah.
And I was listening to, because I can't help but listen to sound quality stuff. And I can tell that you record in an environment that doesn't have treated walls, because you can hear the sound of the voice bouncing off the walls in the room. I can hear her voice in your microphone and vice versa. So like that's stuff that I have to solve. Like with Millennial Suck, we have 3 hosts. And then plus whatever guest we have, there could be 5, 6 microphones all running in that room. And you saw it's not a very big room.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a thing that I have to solve sometimes, where I might have to go in and literally cut out chunks of the microphone where somebody's not talking into it, but that mic can hear the person talking, and you get weird echoes and stuff. So like I said, more mics, just more problems.
More mics, more problems indeed. Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Like, because I do pick that up sometimes. I'm like, oh, okay. And now I have to like try to balance these mics. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, that makes sense that you would then have the tracks split where it's like, all right, this one person's talking, and then we got to cut everybody else out.
Yeah.
So we're not getting that. What happens when you have 2 people talk at once? You just leave both. I mean, I guess you got to leave both in.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do. In a perfect world, you would have perfect isolation on each mic. And that's where, like, if you ever watch like Howard Stern or somebody like that, there's a room full of people with microphones, but they are on total opposite sides of the room from each other. They're almost not even in the same room. They've got like walls between them.
Right.
They're doing that because of the sound. They're keeping other people's voices out of each individual microphone so that stuff doesn't happen. But, again, podcasting has just become so easy. People can do it right in their living room. The problem is, in a living room, you're only 2 feet away from somebody.
Right.
So you're going to hear their voice in your mic, and you can either deal with that or not. The cool thing about with podcasts is that there's no rules really to it. Like, people don't mind not having perfect sound. They're more worried about the content. As long as it doesn't sound bad.
Yeah.
Like, if it hurts my ears to listen to it, that's one thing. But if I can hear some echo, my brain will get used to that. I'm more worried about what you're saying.
Right.
But, in a song where somebody's spending $100,000 to come in and get the best recording they can get, you better fix all those fucking problems before you send it to me,
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Oh man, I'm glad you get that transition for me here, because that's something that we talked about drums, talked about bass guitar, but like with singers, like how, because I always see like the booth, and whether it's like there's like I can think of like watching even down to the point where like people will sometimes have like an old shower that they will soundproof, and it's just like, hey man, this is what we got for this album. But like, how does that whole thing work with like putting somebody in a recording booth to sing?
It really comes down to their experience level, I think, is probably the biggest thing. If you've got somebody who's never recorded in a professional environment before, typically it's overwhelming. They're very stressed out. It's like, imagine the first time that you did a podcast, there's a lot of like, I don't know what to do with my hands kind of energy, so that's where, being a good producer it's halfway knowing what you're doing technically and halfway being basically like an amateur psychologist, understanding how to deal with people's psyches and, understanding how to overcome nervous energy and make people feel at home, make people feel safe, but keeping people on track so that they're, productive. Like, some people show up in the studio and you've got to get them over their nerves. Some people show up in a studio ready to party, and you've got to be like, okay, that's fine, but we still got to be productive.
Right.
Some people are control freaks. They know exactly what they want, and if you try to push them in any direction away from that, they'll get hostile. Some people have no idea what they want. They just know they want to do this and they need somebody's help. So they're expecting you to be partly a producer as well. Like, give me feedback, give me ideas, help me write the song, etc. So, I mean, it really is a case by case basis depending on who you're dealing with.
I think that's a huge thing when you start dealing with clients, is that whole wild card aspect of the client.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who's coming through the door and how they work, and if their process works like your process. And then yeah, having to kind of like be a bit of a Sherpa and kind of get them through the process. Like, okay, this is the way this works. This is how we do it. This is what happens. And it is a real motherfucker when people start pushing back on your process. And it's like, look, man, I know how this works. Like, I'm trying to help you here, but you're making it really difficult right now.
And that's where it's nice. Like, once you reach that upper echelon of work, especially like as an engineer or a producer, the people that you're working with at that point, excuse me.
That's it.
They are, you know, if you're working in a studio, like I said, where somebody's paying $100,000 for your services, they've done this before. They know what they're doing. You can count on them. You know, you don't have to give them much guidance. You might need to give them a little something if they're not feeling it that day, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, you know, you're going to get badass performances. You just need to know what you're doing to make sure that you capture that performance. I know, I was listening to Sylvia Massey. She's a really, really badass producer. She's like produced like Tool and Tom Petty, all kinds of people. And she was talking about working with Tom Petty specifically. He was a force in music, we all know, and he knew it. And he expected people around him to be at his level with whatever they were doing. She was like, if Tom Petty and his band stepped into your studio and started playing and you didn't capture it and you were like, hey guys, can you play that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hit record in time. You were fired immediately. Like, no, we're here because we know what we're doing. You're here because you know what you're doing. You just showed you don't. Get the fuck out.
Oof.
Like, once you get into that upper echelon, time is money, you know,
Right.
it's serious business at that point. So, you know, they treat time as money and they expect the same from you. When you're working with, you know, a small time local artist, you know, half the time they spend in the studio might just be chilling, you know, like just trying to figure out what they want to do, you know, maybe having a smoke before they jump into the studio, whatever the case may be. They're not playing 300 shows a year. They don't have to work. Like, I only have I only have time to be recording for the next, you know, day and a half, and I've got to get a whole 2 songs done in that time. We got to fucking go. That pressure isn't there at that level. So, I mean, the money is great once you get to that, you know, those more elite artists, but you know, you really, really have to put your time in and cut your teeth to get there.
What kind of difference is there for performers? And I mean, I got a lot of questions about the recording process. I got about 5 on deck right now in my head that I want to ask you. But one thing I really want to talk about is, like, what is the difference between like a performer playing live to an audience and a performer being in the studio? Is it same energy, different energy? Does it depend on who it is? Like, what's that feel like? Because I'm thinking what you're saying with like Tom Petty, and I'm thinking about like, there's got to be like recording Tom Petty, but then I've also seen the way he performs, but he's also not quite as, it's like he's like a wild man on stage, you know, but like, you know, if you got maybe like a band that's, you know, I could think of maybe like AFI or something like that, where like there's a lot of movement, like Davey Havoc's running around left side of the stage, right side of the stage, the guitar players are all fucking spinning in a circle. Like, what's the difference between live performance and getting those kind of acts in studio?
So there's a couple differences there where one is the goal. You know, when you go see somebody live, their goal is to put on a great show. In the studio, the goal is to create a great track. And, you know, in a live setting, you don't have multiple takes. So you've got to put your all into it, and you've got to be practiced enough to know that you can do this in your sleep. In the studio, you've got more freedom to be creative, to make creative decisions and, you know, experiment. The relationship is also different. So the relationship between a performer and crowd is entertainer and consumer. In a studio, the relationship is between two professionals who are working together on a project. You're coworkers. That's a very, very different relationship. It's sort of like when you go to see somebody live, there's a different relationship between you in the crowd and the performer than there is between the performer and the sound guy.
Right.
They are coworkers putting on a performance for you. You know, that dynamic makes it just totally different. Like if you're an expert in your craft and you're talking to somebody who's a fan of your craft, you're going to have a very different conversation with them versus the conversation you're going to have with somebody who also is a professional in the same craft you're in. You can just level with them in a totally different way. So that dynamic makes a huge difference in the way that you communicate, the way that ideas are expressed, and the way that energy is given back and forth. You know, at a show, all you got to do is enjoy yourself and scream. And, you know, the band feeds off of that. In a studio, sometimes as the producer, you might stand up and scream like, that was fucking badass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like
this rocks. Okay.
yeah, but it's a totally different kind of energy. I think there's also that aspect of, I want to say vulnerability, but it's different because in front of a crowd, an artist is also vulnerable. But in the studio, when you're trying to get the best performance you can out of an artist, you're asking them to be vulnerable in the most marketable way possible, which it sounds like a heartless way to put it, but it's really not. It's more so like if you're singing a sad song, I can't see you singing it if I listen to this track. You know, just like you were setting up the vinyl. If you stick a vinyl on that table and start playing the track, you can't see the artist, but I still want you to feel their pain, or I want you to feel their memory that they're revisiting. I want you to be taken into the story they're telling, or whatever it is. Trying to guide an artist into giving the best performance in the studio is totally different than an artist giving their best performance to a crowd of screaming fans. It's just a different mindset.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're describing like making a film on some level, where like a director is talking to an actor and being like, "Hey, for this scene, I need you to do this, and I need it to come off like this."
Right.
And you know, think about like your character has been on this quest, and you're finally here, and you're the hero of the day, and react to it appropriately. Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's a cool way to put it. Is there a line for you like, so between like, what is the line between like sound engineer and producer? And then is there times when you're both at the same time, or is there time where you're distinctly different?
It depends on the project. Right now, at this point in my career, I spend more of my time as both. Again, you don't really see the separation between engineer and producer until you start getting into the more expensive projects, because that means more people are getting paid. The less people's bills you have to pay, the cheaper your services are. So the line between producer and engineer is the engineer knows the technical stuff. I know how to point a mic at something and pick it up in the best way possible. I know how to listen to a room to figure out where we should record this thing. I know what microphone to use. I know what I need to do to the audio once it's recorded, the technical shit. The producer is typically the more creative side of that, where, if I'm helping somebody finish a song, say they bring a song to me and they're like, I've got everything written except I don't know how to end the song, or I don't know how to intro it. I might help them on the creative side of like, okay, here's what we should do. That's more producer. I'm not using technical skill in that sense. This is more creative skill. So that's the main difference between those two jobs, is as a producer, I'm there to help you create the best product possible, the best listening experience possible. As the engineer, I'm there to capture that listening experience in the best way possible and to mix, master, and optimize that listening experience in the best way possible.
When you're doing the production, when you're in the producer role of this, do people come in and like? So again, this is me as a novice. In my head, the way I think it would work is, I'm a band. I come in and somebody has lyrics, and then we wrote the music, and we've been playing and practicing, and now we're ready to put the album together. Like, is that what happens, or like how much like where do you get into the part where you're like, hey man, try it like this but slower, or try it like this but like how does this work?
I mean, that again goes back to navigating the psyche of your client.
Okay.
At the end of the day, regardless of what you want as the producer or the engineer,
Sure.
you are being paid.
So you sort of got to vote. You got to, hey, this is, but you don't really have a real vote. Like the band has a vote
Yeah.
because they're paying you.
It is their music.
And you can be like, hey, try this. And they're like,
Yeah.
no.
And it's more of a like, instead of, hey, try this, it's, hey, maybes. You know, there's a lot more of like, what if we did this? You know, like throwing ideas at them more so as like an optional thing. Like here's an idea I have, you know, this other person that's wildly successful did this thing. What if we tried something like that? Or, you might hear something that could be done better or whatever. And you can be honest with them and be like, I think you can do better than that. You know, I think, you know, what you just played was great, but I think you've got more in you, you know, driving somebody to give you the best performance. But as far as what eventually comes out of those speakers has to make them happy above all else. So when it comes down to like how you navigate that, it's how do you work with that person? I've heard stories from producers who talk about, you know, there are some artists who need to be told they fucking sucked to get the best performance out of them. But there are some artists where if you told them that was bad, they'll leave the studio crying.
Right.
You know, they'll
Yeah.
fire you. They'll be pissed off. They'll throw your equipment at the wall and say, fuck you, you know? You've got to know how to navigate the personality you're working with or the
Right.
personalities in a group. But ultimately, as long as you can level with them and understand, like, I'm here to give you exactly what you want, and I'm going to try to make it the best it can possibly be. If we disagree on what the best is, I'm going to make your version of it.
Yeah, I've always wanted to be. So one of the things I thought was cool was when Metallica did the Some Kind of Monster documentary, just because you got to see like the creative process of what that looks like of a band working in studio. And I always wanted to see something with that with Rick Rubin and just kind of like what his process is like, because what you're talking about there with your different personalities and thinking, it's like, all right, this man's worked with Slayer, but he's also worked with Lil Jon and the East Side Boys.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Rick Rubin's amazing.
Like he's worked with Johnny Cash, he's worked with the Beastie Boys. You know, he's done a ton of Red Hot Chili Peppers albums. Like he's just done all this different shit. And I'm just trying to think in my head, like, what is it like for this man in the studio to be working with these huge artists and bands and just being like, hey man, maybe try this, or, you know, and being that like, not a member of the band, but somebody that's giving direction of like, okay, you're trying this, but maybe this, and has been a major part of all sorts of very successful projects.
And if you want the answer to that question, Rick Rubin just released a book.
Oh, nice.
Talking about this. And it's not like a biography type thing at all. He's talking about more of the philosophical side of this stuff. Because in his mind, he literally prefaces the entire book by talking about this is all coming from years of experience working with all kinds of different people in music. And what I've noticed is very consistent among them. And he says one of the biggest things he's noticed is that the artist generally isn't responsible for what they create. You know, and a lot of people talk about this. We are like conduits to the art. You know, it just kind of comes out of you. You don't really control your thoughts, right? I mean, if I tell you to stop thinking about pink elephants right now, you can't.
Instantly pink elephants.
Yeah. Your stream of consciousness is not under your control as much as you might want to think it is. So when it comes to these creative endeavors, and particularly with music and like lyrics and stuff like that, so much of it is experienced from the artist's perspective as a stream of uncontrollable creativity. and it just strikes sometimes. And, you know, Rick goes into like real, like super depth on this where like, you know, regardless of what higher power you might believe in, it seems to be that the universe, whatever consciousness is, kind of pushes its way out through the consciousness, and we get art out of that. And knowing how to navigate that and manifest it when you need to and record it when it comes into the world is a skill. And know it, you know, just he talks about navigating that and understanding it. It's really, really cool. He's a very spiritual person.
Yeah, very much so. He's an interesting dude.
Yeah.
How do you pick out okay, so I think this goes back to you're getting paid to do this question, but how do you in the band, or how do you pick out what is like the most forefront thing in a song? Like, how do you decide like, all right, hey, we're going to drop the guitars back and we're going to pump up the bass because like we have Les Claypool on bass and this makes sense. Yeah. Or we really want to focus on the drums on this track and that's what we need to be on the forefront here. Like, how do you make those decisions and who gets the final say in that?
It's cultural for the most part. You know, a lot of that comes from understanding the culture of the music that you're releasing. You know, in the Western world, like right now, the trend is loud as fuck drums. In the past, you know, it was more the drums were a background instrument and the guitars were where most of the virtuosity was. If you listen to like modern rock and metal, the trend is more focused on the drums themselves, and the guitars and bass turn into more of a supporting instrument, and the singers have become basically the biggest spotlight in the band. So, you know, it depends on where you're releasing the music, you know, versus like if you were recording a band that, you know, is native to a tribe in Africa, they're going to play by very, very different rules. Or I've heard a producer talk about producing vocals for a band in Russia, and we use like de-essers to take away like the sounds of like S's and T's and ch sound. They can create really, really harsh frequencies that hurt your ears. So we typically try to tamp those down, but in Russia, it's a very sibilant language. So they want that stuff. They don't want you to do that kind of things to it. So it really depends who you're making it for, and again, what the goal of the final product is. But ultimately, most of who you're working with, they're being influenced by trends. You know, the people who are popular in the thing that they're trying to do, they're typically in some way, shape, or form emulating what's happening now or what has happened before. And there's no such thing as originality at this point. Humans have been around for too long. We've been recording music for over 100 years at this point. Everything you can think to do has been done to some extent. So everything is influenced by something else.
So you're kind of basing it upon the genre that this lives in, where it's like,
yeah,
there's a sound of this genre, and the sound of this genre dictates that these drums are loud as fuck. Guitar, we're going to phase you down a little bit. Bass, you might be non-existent, and depending on what it is.
Yeah, and it depends what the artist wants, what's trendy at the time. It just depends on the goals. But on a case-by-case basis, you know, if I'm just listening to one song, take the culture out of it, take the trends out of it, I'm just paying attention to what's happening in this one track. If it's a rock song, say, and I've got, you know, a powerhouse vocalist and a really badass guitarist, well, when the guitarist isn't, or when the singer isn't singing, I want something else to grab your attention. That's another thing to navigate as an engineer or a producer or as like a mixer, is the human attention span can only pay attention to like 2 or 3 things at once tops. So I might want the sound of the drums, the bass, and the rhythm guitars to kind of be one cohesive sound, so you hear it as one thing. And then what I'm going to grab your attention with is the vocal and the guitar solo. So I will crank up the sound of the guitars when the vocalist isn't singing so that the guitars grab your attention. And then maybe there's like a breakdown where there's a synth part. I might have the synth louder during that part so it grabs your attention. What we're doing is creating kind of a symphony of things that you can't pay attention to everything at once. So I'm going to guide your attention as the mixer and be like, here's what I want you to pay attention to. And I'm just going to turn that up when the time comes.
You're spotlighting things.
Yeah.
You're like, pay attention to this now. Now pay attention to this. Now look over here.
But nothing stops. The other stuff is still there,
right,
but it becomes more of a supporting role instead of the spotlight.
Do you have like a signature sound of stuff that you do? Like if people come to you with a project, do they know what you're making, or are you kind of more of a versatile person where you're like, hey man, I can do multiple genres and I can make them sound really good?
I honestly, I don't think I've been around long enough to have established myself that way. And I think that affords me a level of freedom, but it also, it's indicative of me being a novice. I'm not an expert at this stuff. I know a lot about it, but, typically with me, I think the main goal is I want you to feel the music. And that when I say that, I don't mean like emotionally. I mean literally like the way the music comes out of the speakers. I don't want you to just hear the drums. I want you to feel the compression of those drums hit you in the chest. I don't want you to just hear the bass. I want it to rumble you, and I like a really dense, loud, in your face, like slamming sound to stuff. And not everybody likes that, so I don't know how good of a job I could honestly do if somebody was like, hey man, I want this to be more laid back and smooth. Like right. I'll do my best, I'll make it sound good regardless. I know how to do that.
But if I had my choice, turn this up over here.
This shit's going to bump, man. Yeah. Like this is going to smack your speakers.
I think one thing, have you ever seen the movie Coda?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I think it won an Oscar a year or two ago, or I know at least a few of the actors in it did. Coda is this movie about a family where the mom, the dad, and the brother are all deaf, and then the daughter is she can hear. And so she becomes like a speaker, like basically she works as kind of their voice to like, because people that don't know American Sign Language can't really talk to them. And so she kind of becomes this translator for them to speak with other people in the community and stuff. It's really good. And then the movie is about her making the decision. She's trying to decide if she's going to go to college or not because she can actually sing. She's a really good singer. And so this becomes this tale of like, well, if she leaves, what happens to her family, or does she stay with them? And then also she's doing this thing that they can't hear. So it's kind of like a weird thing for them because they can't hear her like what she does and what she loves. And but the reason why I bring this movie up is because as you're talking about like the bumping, the dad rolls up to her high school one day and he's like just blasting gangster rap, and she's signed him like, turn it down, like what are you doing? And he signs back, he's like I love this shit. He's like, I love the way it feels. And
hell yeah.
Yeah. And that's a thing that like some, that happens sometimes with people who are deaf, or like they can feel music and they're like, oh, this is cool. And they can feel the pattern of rhythm and beat.
I would connect with that really well because my brother's deaf.
Yeah. Nice.
That, he's, I mean, not completely, it's profound, but he wears hearing aids. He's somewhere like 98% deaf, something like that.
Oh,
so
shit.
he's got just enough to where like with his hearing aids blasting the sound, he basically combines the little bit of sound he has with lip reading. And like most of the time you can't tell, like as long as you're looking at him,
right, he
can read your lips just fine. And people are surprised to find out he can't hear for shit.
Right.
And that's always kind of sucked. That's been a soft spot for me. Like, my main passion in this world is creating audio.
Right.
And his big passion is like video shit. Like he's an amazing illustrator, an incredible videographer. He's awesome at branding and like marketing, social media kind of stuff. So like he and I work together. Like he did our last music video.
Nice.
But you can imagine like the hurdles he has to jump as a deaf person, not only shooting and producing, but like editing a music video.
Right. And trying to sync it up.
But he's fucking incredible at it, dude. Like
That's
that guy's a superhero of a person. It's amazing.
Well, okay. One more movie that kind of that falls in. Have you ever seen The Sound of Metal?
I seen the previews. I haven't watched the movie. I'm like, this movie's gonna fuck me up, dude.
It is going to fuck you up, but it's worth watching.
Yeah.
It definitely is. But yeah, that's another great one too. Okay, so what about and you kind of hit up on it earlier about talking about kind of having to be that bit of the band, the horse whisperer type thing. We're like, okay, personalities, who am I working with? And I think that's a skill that a lot of people don't think of when you're in creative projects is, people talk about like project management, but it's like a big part of project management is being able to talk to other people and relate and be able to communicate and not have people get pissed off and all that. But do you ever, like, when you're working in studio, do you ever get anxiety about that, or like, how do you approach that side of it of like working with all these different personalities?
It actually ends up being kind of easy for me because I get anxiety about everyday normal conversation. I hate small talk. I'm so bad at it. I have no interest in it.
It's fucking awful.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
So
I'd rather not talk.
I get really weird in conversation. And the cool thing about working with artists is that they want to get weird usually. And like they're typically the people who create things like, artistic things in general are really deep, awkward, troubled people. There's a lot of mental illness in creativity, and there's a lot of trauma in it. So, I mean, these are people who have depths to them that you can't explore in small talk. So typically, I try to, get into the weird shit right off the bat. Like, if we're going to be creating together, we've got to basically be kind of under the covers together here in ways that we wouldn't normally be intimate with other people this way, So I thrive in that. If we're going to have philosophical conversation, if we're going to talk about weird shit, get high and discuss the universe, man, like I'm so much more comfortable in that kind of setting than water cooler football talk or whatever. Like in that case, it makes it, I think I kind of thrive in that because like I can navigate people's personalities when they're being vulnerable and being good at that makes it easy to be good at working with them artistically because people are really sensitive in that moment.
Yeah. And I think I'm with you, and you hit upon a thing there with like the small talk thing. I hate it. And I'd way better do something like this where I'm just like, I'm having a conversation. We're talking about something that's like interesting and there's twists and there's turn and you learn something as you go through it. And I always wonder, and sometimes I do wonder this of like the idea of like, what would it be to just like be like a normal dude, like just to be a guy who had no creative outlet, and just didn't make shit. And what would that life be like? Because I've always been making things, and so the idea of like being a person that doesn't make things is always foreign to me. My buddy Ben doesn't make So my buddy Ben, I always call Ben a consumer because Ben consumes stuff. Ben has watched every UFC fight ever. He went back to like WrestleMania 1 and watched every WWE pay-per-view from like 83 to modern day, and he has played every video game you can think of. Like Ben just consumes stuff because I'm like, well, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, I go to work and he's like, I just come home and I like game or I watch stuff. And I'm like, that's what I'm creating. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't do that. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that there's people like you out in the world that consume because I create things and I make things and people like you get it. And that's awesome. And, but now he's turned into a bit of a creator himself because he started he got really big into retro gaming and he's like making his own arcade cabinet and stuff and like building all his own emulator shit. But, forever, man, he was just a guy that was just consuming things. And so I just always wonder like what it's like to be on that side of it where you don't create, you exist and you take in things.
Well, I think everybody's got something that they can nerd out about. And that's, I think, what it is. Like when we're talking about people who create things, all creativity is something that you're obsessed with, that you've turned into a productive venture. That guy with like WWE, for example, like I could connect with that person, maybe not on a creative level, but I could still get deep with them because I see this happens all the time when like I will find what people are obsessed with and then just talk to them about it because that's more interesting. It's a better conversation. They open up, they lighten up. They're like, dude, I'm sorry, I don't normally talk like this with people. And I'm like, please fucking continue. Like that's so much more interesting than, us trying to just like drag our way through the, hey, how's it going? The weather today. Oh, fucking, did you see what the president said? Fucking, like, nobody cares about that shit right now. Like, let's talk about the shit that you're obsessed with, that you're embarrassed to talk about most of the time.
Hi, welcome to the concept of my podcast.
Exactly. That's why I love this, dude. I'm such a fan of what you do.
Yeah, dude, it is. It is just like a fun thing where it's just, to have people in and nerd out because it's the thing that brings people joy. I'm a firm believer in, when I meet people, I don't really care about what your job is. Like, what are you into? Like, what do you enjoy? And then you see the spark in people and you see them light up and you're like, all right, cool, let's talk. And either it's something I know about and I can join in with them and we can chat about it, or I don't know fuck all about it, but hey, tell me about it and I'm going to learn.
Right.
Yeah. 100% agree. What genres of music do you work in? Like, is there anything that you specialize in, or is there anything that like you primarily just do?
I would say I specialize in rock. And that's just because of my background. I started out recording my own music. So being that I've spent all of these years learning to properly record a drum set, that's something that's kind of become a nuanced skill and a niche in and of itself in the modern world because so much is programmed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of MIDI that goes on in music as opposed to, just analog drum kits and guitar cabinets and stuff like that. So part of where I excel is more of that like old school skill where, putting microphones on instruments and knowing how to deal with the problems and things that you get from that. Cause I like the sound of those things. And that's not to shit on EDM and stuff like that. I love like a really well, produced, mixed and mastered like hip hop or dance track or a pop track, anything like that. But as far as like where my skill is the most honed, I would say it's in analog acoustic instruments that, you have to point a microphone at and capture the performance of as opposed to programming it. I have been getting more into like hip hop production recently, like, programming drums and trying to get more into like synthesizers and electronic sounds just because they're fun to play with. They're really fun to play with. And they make really, really cool tracks and noises and stuff. So I think if somebody were to pay me for my services, I would tell them if what you want is a well-produced hip hop track, I'm going to point you to somebody who's better than me at that. But if what you want is a well-produced live performed like rock track, I'm your guy for sure.
What do you ever get into recording live performance stuff, like doing like soundboard stuff for live performances?
I've been doing that recently. I haven't done that, professionally. I haven't gone out and done that at a show. I did just recently invest in a soundboard.
Nice.
And I've got a PA system. One thing that I've really wanted to get into recently is doing live sound. And I want to start recording live performances. That way I can take them home and, maybe make a little extra money doing this, but also just because it'd be fun. Taking home, if I can record all of the tracks going through the soundboard, take them home and produce it and make a live album for a band. Like, if they're going to play a half-hour show, cool. I'll produce you guys a half-hour long live album. That's something I've really, really wanted to get into recently. And I thought about doing that even in like podcast form, something like that where, say something like this, you sit down with a band, you have an interview with them, but then say over there is a stage and we have them play 2 or 3 songs and I record and mix and master that into the podcast. So it becomes half performance, half interview kind of thing. I always thought that would be super cool.
It seems kind of cool. How what do you see as the difference? Like, do you like live albums? Do you not like live albums? Do you see something different than studio albums? Like, how do you process those two worlds?
It's definitely a different thing.
Yeah.
I love them. for a different reason than studio albums. Because studio albums, again, like everything's so controlled. You know, it's, I mean, the minutest details in a live or in a
Recorded
studio track are all done on purpose. Everything you hear has a specific purpose to it. When you listen to a live performance on an album, you know, again, you're capturing a moment as opposed to capturing a song. And you know, when you're capturing that moment between the artist and the crowd, you know, that's a different thing you're capturing. So it's a totally different feeling. You know, having the sound of 10,000 people screaming in a recording is so outside the realm of what you would get in a studio. You know what I mean? Like that is, you know, you're getting something, again, kind of spiritual happening there. Like when you go to a concert, there's, I don't know if everybody experiences this, but I know for me, like no church could ever give me the kind of spiritual experience I have seeing live music, hearing the sound of thousands of people around me screaming in unison. Like that's just such a good fucking feeling for me. And having that recorded is super cool. Like that's its own thing entirely.
I didn't really notice that thing until after COVID. So because I just took it for granted of going to shows, and it was just like, oh, it's going to a show. And then I remember not going to a show for a few years. And then the first one I went back to, remember I went and like, or it wasn't the first show I went to, but it was like the first heavy show that I went to. It was Gojira and Deftones at the Andrew J. Brady Center. And you know, like hearing like Gojira live, who they have an incredible drummer.
Absolutely.
And just like sitting there and just being like, oh shit, like we're all feeling this right now. And I'm surrounded by thousands of people. Everybody's headbanging and getting down to this. And, you know, we're just getting sonically assaulted by this band. And it's just like, fuck, man, like this. Okay. Yeah. I missed this. I really missed this.
There's definitely a contrast that became much more obvious.
Yeah.
When you get deprived of it for a while.
And I'm a big fan of seeing a band live and they don't sound like they do in the studio. And what I mean by that is like there's some bands that are so professionally polished that like when they play on stage, it sounds exactly like the track.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh man, like I was kind of hoping this would be a little faster.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody'd miss a note every once in a while, or just, you know, just more like a different rendition in the way that it's being sung.
Yeah.
And just a difference in energy level or something. But yeah, I that's what I want out of a live performance. I want something that's unique and special. And, you know, I don't care if you get everything right, like, but I want to see the emotion of it.
And I feel the exact same way, man. I've always loved the human element. I think that's what attracted me to specializing in capturing live performance as opposed to electronic performance. Is the human factor in it is just so important to me. I like the fact that, you know, it doesn't matter how great of a drummer you are, you're human. You can never hit perfectly on the metronome every single time. Mm-hmm. But that little bit of, you know, just imperfection makes it sound better.
Yeah.
You know, and I agree with you on the live performance thing too, man. Like, I don't mind if a band performs a song exactly as it's performed on the track, but I want more out of it when I go to see you live. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than when a band sounds worse live than they do on an album.
That's rough.
Nothing more heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, that is, I will agree with you with that. When you go see somebody and they're having a bad night and they don't want to be there, you know, and it's because you build it up in your head, like, oh, this is going to be great. And then they come out and they shit a brick and you're just like, oh, fuck, man.
Yep.
I'm regretting this decision.
But that's what makes the greats so great.
Exactly.
When you go to see them and you're like, okay, this is why these guys are where they are. Like, they've earned that spot in the industry. They've earned their careers because they are fucking amazing at what they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is something to be said about that with like bands that do have charisma and people that know how to work a crowd and get people invested and that energy and that, you know, and giving that back and forth. Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing to see.
Yeah, punk is the perfect example of that. Because, like, I'm not a huge fan of punk music. You know, it's not terrible, but, you know, it's almost like bad on purpose. And like nobody has more on stage energy than a bunch of angry fucking teenagers. You know what I mean? Like if you get some kids up on stage playing maybe not the best you've ever seen, but playing harder than anybody you've ever seen, that's still a better show than a bunch of virtuosos who are bored. You know what I mean? Like it's just, there's nothing even close to that.
And I think it's cool to see people come from that and take that raw talent they had when they were younger and then turn that into like the professional level stage persona they are now. I think of like one of my favorite bands is Terror, and Scott Vogel, who's their lead singer. I mean, I think Vogel's like in his late 40s now.
Yeah.
And that dude is like still to this day, like he is Mr. fucking hardcore, and he's shouting shit out and telling kids to fucking circle pit and get up on stage and run around. And like, he's got that same energy show after show. And, you know, this man's touring Europe and coming back and doing shows in the States and small stages, big stages, all that shit. And it's like, man, dude, like, how is this your world? Like, that you do for a living is you get up on stage every night for about a half hour to 45 minutes and just yell your ass off with this level of energy day in and day out.
And that's what I love about art in general is like, if you can somehow manage that hump between doing art and doing art professionally, you've basically earned the right to never grow up. And that's one of my favorite things about it. Like when you go see a live band, it doesn't matter how old Metallica gets, there's still a bunch of kids on stage. You know what I mean? Like they're doing what they love at a childhood level. And you know, when you can manifest that young energy into what you do and make a living off of it, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. I think it's incredible. Whether you're a painter or an actor or a musician, it doesn't matter. If what you do, you enjoy. Like if, you know, 10-year-old you was dreaming about what you're doing now, you never grow up. You have that childhood energy until you die. And that's what life should be, dude. That's so much cooler than, you know, growing up and picking yourself up by your bootstraps and doing the good old American dream, you know, raising a family and white picket fence bullshit. Like if that's what you want out of life, fucking do that shit. But if what you want is to be a child for the rest of your life, do art. Do the shit out of it, man. It's like, it's literally called playing. If a group of adults gets together in a band, whether they're 60 or 20, what we call that is playing music. You're literally at play as an adult. What else gives you the option to do that?
Not too many other things.
Yeah.
Well, look, man, we're winding down. Is there anything you want to talk about we didn't hit on tonight?
Oh, man, your tattoos. They're really fucking awesome. You decided to wear shorts, and I appreciate it because you've got leg sleeves that are fucking dope, dude.
Yeah, most of my leg stuff is when I got a little older and I just started getting funny shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a Kenny Powers tattoo from Eastbound and Down.
That's awesome.
I have a lobster claw that says death because I'm allergic to shellfish. You know, just like shit like that.
I love the dogs, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
It's great.
I had to get the dogs on my legs.
Yep.
So yeah, man, it's fun.
I'm such a tattoo nerd. I love them.
Yeah, they're good. I'm getting ready to. I'm trying to get these things finished out this year. That is the goal, to finally get my bottom legs finished because I got some room on the back there, and we're working on it.
Gonna go to the grave without an inch of skin covered, man.
Oh man, I don't know. I really, speaking of that whole thing earlier, man, I wish I would have known now. I wish I would have known then what I know now. I really wish I would have got my back and my ass done when I was like in my 20s and I had all this testosterone and I had to sit like a rock because I know that shit hurts. And I'm like, oh man, why did I not just go ahead and get this done?
Right.
But I was dumb. I was like, no, I got to get these sleeves because then people know I'm cool. You know, and it's like, dude, your arms, I wish I could just get my forearm tattooed for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
when it comes to getting tattooed, it's like, yeah, just sit there and be like, this is not bad, as opposed to some other spots I've left. I'm like, oh, fuck, man, this is just going to be ouchy.
Yep. I can't wait. Eventually, I feel like we're going to develop technology where we can, like, change our tattoos. You know, I think that's going to be cool. Like, at some point, humans will figure that shit out.
I mean, yeah, we figured out how to laser them off of ourselves. Yeah. So, yeah, who knows what the fucking future's going to bring. Well, speaking of the future, man, like, what's next? Is there, like, a long-term goal? Like, is there something that you're wanting to do? Is there any bucket list items that you got on out there?
You know, I've had the same bucket list item that I've had since I was a kid, and I've already done it once, and that's to be on tour. I've toured one time with a band. We did like an East Coast run and then across the Midwest, and it was the most miserable, awful, amazing thing I've ever done with my life. It was what made me really realize that I wanted to do this as a full-time profession. And, that was before I had started recording and all that. But I think, ultimately I got into the recording so that I could fund being able to perform and write and create my own shit. So I think, if I could just live a life where, I spend the rest of my days creating music, performing music, helping other people create their music. And then even lately, man, like I said, I've been getting in like the foretold fiction thing. Like that's, I've tried to turn that into like TV show level voice quality shit, so, if I can make audio work and recording and mixing and mastering, like I think over the years, I've kind of just zoomed out slowly over time and expanded the horizon of what I consider my goals to be. And at this point, it's evolved from being a drummer to being a songwriter to being a producer to being an engineer and all that. And at this point, I think I've just landed on like what I want to do is capture the cool shit happening in the world. Like there's 8 billion people on this planet, and all over the place, there are really fucking cool people doing cool shit all the time. I want to have the skills to capture those moments, whether it be in audio, video, and just make those moments exist forever. And I think ultimately that's my long-term goal, is to just be the dude you call when you need something cool that you want forever, to never, you don't have to look back on it fondly. You can hit play and watch it again.
Like an audio historian.
Yeah, essentially.
Capturing things and making sure that it exists.
Yeah.
And there's something to be important to be said about that. Is like the idea of being able to make something that does stand the test of time, because there's so much stuff that we make, and there's like paintings and stuff that are literally thousands of years old. Then you have like Jackson Pollock, who was painting with house paint enamel in like the 50s, and that shit's now cracking and falling apart, and it's not even a century old.
Yeah.
And it's not going to stand the test of time. Like those things are going to disintegrate.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not even like, are they even going to make 100 years? And when you think of like the lifespan of the planet, 100 years is a fucking blink of an eye.
It's nothing.
A century?
Gone.
Like, yeah. But at the same time, a century is a fucking long time too.
Yeah.
There is the flip side of that. My great grandmother lived to be over 100, and I was just like, dude, like she grew up in a time where she went from like people with horse-drawn carriages to cars.
Yeah.
And then watched the moon landing and watched like commercial air travel develop. Like she saw interstates get built.
She's just seen the world change many times.
Yeah, many times. Lived through like presidents and wars, like being in world, imagine being like living in 1940 and being like, are the Nazis going to take over the world? Yeah. Like, that's a real possibility right now.
And they almost did.
This could happen, and just seeing that. So, yeah, man, it's an interesting thing when you speak history, because sometimes history is really long and sometimes it's really short.
Well, hopefully what we're creating now lasts a good long time.
And in the future, hologram sonic gem cubes that will emit sound will pump out your shit.
Hey, as soon as those are invented, I'm going to be one of the first people learning to master that shit. Cause
that's the thing, man. Yeah. Technology will always feed into art, and it will always create new shit. And who knows what music and art and culture will look like in 50 years.
I'm excited to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, even just like what is the music in 2033 going to sound like? Like, I mean, think about the difference between what we hear and see now versus 2013. Drive that another 10 years, 20 years forward. I mean, our minds are going to be blown by the shit that happens.
Well, I mean, genres are just melting into each other. And there's also the thing too now. Oh, let me get your opinion on this of like, so, two distinct things are happening right now. So for the first time in forever, vinyl is the most sold physical way to get to get music. Like it's not CDs, it's not tapes, it's vinyl. Vinyl factories are having trouble keeping up with the productions that bands are wanting right now. Like if you try to get something put out on vinyl, you might be backed up over a year to get shit. At the same time, bands have started to look at like Clown from Slipknot has talked about, like, this is the last Slipknot album we're going to make. Like from here on out, we're just going to release stuff in like one-off format, because people have discovered with like the algorithm and things like Spotify, where it's like, instead of putting out a full album at once, it's way more advantageous for us to drop a new track like every 2 months or every 3 months, and then just kind of parse it out like that. So how do these two very different things coexist, and which format do you think wins out going into the future?
I don't think they're in competition. I think so. The reason that technology moves forward is to make something in our lives easier, ultimately, and that's with all technology. What we've done, since vinyl, is create more efficient ways of getting music. The things that we've listened to music on have gotten smaller and smaller until eventually they became digitized. So we're at the point now where the most convenient way to get music is not in physical form at all. So that means the physical forms of music are now their own separate market. And I think, there are different reasons. If you want to consume as much music as possible, now you've got the digital formats. You can do like what Clown was saying about Slipknot. A lot of people are doing that. Just release it in singles. There's no reason to release a whole album and keep people waiting 2 years for more music. You can just release one new song every couple of months and continuously feed into the modern music market. That makes it easy for you as a creator. It makes it easier for the consumers. The technology is there to make everyone's life easier the way it is. But if what you want is, like we were talking about with vinyl earlier, there's a different sound to vinyl. There's, like you were saying, that there's the how did you describe it? The process of putting it on the table and all that.
The ritual.
The ritual.
Yeah.
If you want the ritual of listening to a cassette or a vinyl, or you want the sound, like we were talking about, Jack White talked about the difference between analog and digital sound. That's a different thing you can go towards now. I'm looking for a certain quality of the music as opposed to the quantity of music. So I don't think they're going to necessarily win out over one another. I think it's more so that you'll just have two different options now. Instead of the most efficient option, now you've got a physical medium that isn't as efficient, but it gives you a different quality. And you've got both to choose from, so that neither of them have to die in the future. It's just one's efficient and one's qualitative.
Well, and I also wonder about the idea of like changing that process of like going in and recording a full album at once, and instead now you switch it to like every 2 to 3 months you're in the studio and you're recording, and then you collect those songs and then release them as an album. Because it would be like, if you did something where like you made something over the course of like from 2023 to 2025 as a 2-year project, you could then release the album of those songs that you released during that time period.
And that's a way to do it. A lot of bands do it that way. While they're on tour, they stop in studios and they'll record. And there are, albums and singles that bands drop where they've recorded at several different studios across the nation while they've been on tour. They're writing new songs in the tour bus and shit like that. So that's something that is happening. I think the only problem that I have with the modern vinyl industry is that all of the music is still being recorded in a digital format and then being pressed to analog. So you kind of lose the point of, like, if you're going to record on a vinyl, I think you should record and release your music digitally, practice the fuck out of it until you can play it perfectly, and then go in and record it the way that the bands did back in the day.
Yeah.
Get it cut directly to the vinyl, because like we were saying with Jack White, a digital recording is millions upon millions of little snapshots that are being put together, whereas an analog recording is a continuous feed of sound. And if you're taking a digital recording and pressing it to vinyl, you're not actually getting the vinyl sound. You might still get the ritual of putting a vinyl on the deck or whatever, but you're not getting the sound of a vinyl cut directly from the studio. So I think it would be more advantageous if you're going to go that route. If you're going to give people the vinyl, feeling, do it all the way. Do it 100%. Record your music in the most, the cheapest, most efficient way possible and get it out there. But, set aside a time where you can go into a studio where they record in an analog format and do all of your songs at once and do an exclusive, analog recording. Cut it straight to vinyl, record it straight to tape. Like Dave Grohl does that. He bought the mixing board and all the recording equipment from Sound City Studios that used to exist here in Cincinnati. He records all of Foo Fighters' music to tape. So it's still in the canisters in his basement. And then he digitizes that and puts it out. So, he's recording all of his shit analog. Do it that way and release it that way specifically for that project. Don't print a digital recording to a vinyl.
Right.
That just kind of defeats the purpose of vinyl for me.
I like what you're saying. I like the idea of looking at this before you look at it is like, well, is it a studio album? Is it a live album? And now is it a live album or is it an analog or digital album?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool way to break it down. Well, look, man, plug your shit one more time before we get out of here.
So Stereo Mammoth is my band. We've released an album, Ego. It's available everywhere you get your music. We're about to drop a new single here in the next couple months. That's almost done being recorded. Millennial Suck podcast. We're on a hiatus right now. We're, upgrading to a video podcast. So sometime in the next month or two, we're going to be releasing the newest episodes of that. You'll be able to finally watch us. Foretold Fiction is that has been like my main project for the past couple of months while everything else has been, kind of on hiatus or, just getting other things ready. That's available everywhere. Just in case anybody's listening that is or knows an animator, we are trying to turn Foretold Fiction into a legitimate cartoon.
Oh, nice.
So if somebody is interested in animation, send us an email, Foretold Fiction, and it's foretold, Fixion, @gmail.com. Get in touch with us. Reach out to us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Let us know, because I will send you our episodes for you to animate. We would love to turn this into an actual show. It's become something really, really cool, and I want to keep doing that forever. And I think people being able to watch it will make a really, really big difference. But yeah, that's what I've got going on, and just keep the projects coming, man. We're gonna keep driving out there and doing shit.
Hell yeah, dude. Listener, you know where to find me at neiltoknoone.com is the website. At neiltoknoone on Instagram is where you can get at me if you want to see shit that I'm making. And you can find the podcast wherever. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. But you know what really helps the podcast? If you tell a friend. And, you can post on Facebook and shit, but then the algorithm's just going to butt fuck and it's going to go away. So just when you're at a bar with a friend or you're out to dinner or you're just talking to somebody, you're texting somebody and you're like, hey, you're into music. Like you collect vinyl or, you're always going to concerts. Tell them about this episode. And then also let them know there's an entire back catalog, over 100 episodes of What You Into, dealing with different collections, different hobbies. At this point, I feel pretty confident in saying I have a podcast about something that you or a friend will be into. All right, Dillon, man, thank you so much for stopping by, dude. It was way fun.
I appreciate you having me, man. This is awesome.
Hell yeah. All right, listener, peace.